Well, hey, everybody, glad to be back with you again. And today's topic is how to use speaking gigs to grow your business. And David, we have a special guest with us today. There's a rose between two thorns on the screen right here today.
That's how it's supposed to be.
That's right.
We had to bring somebody in to class it up a little.
That's right. We needed some help, didn't we?
Yeah, you need a little female energy in this group.
That's
We
right.
need a lot of-
We even made her get up early and try to function.
You know when someone likes you when they'll actually get out of bed extra early to do something like this with you. So
Hey, I told you I'm up early. I'm just not camera ready this early in the morning.
See, that's the thing. Lisa's
that's a
taught me
true
over the
test
years
of friendship, though.
we guys have it easy compared to the ladies.
You do. You guys are like, let's go live, 7 a.m. All right. You get up, you brush your teeth. You don't even have to do that if you don't want. And it's like for a female,
For the record, I did brush my teeth.
Good. So did I.
Well, David's even extra early today because he's in a remote location on a different time zone.
That's right. That's right.
But good for you, David. Way to get up extra early.
I am. I'm committed to the team.
Well, folks, we want to talk about this today because we're just looking at different ways to truly grow your business. Obviously, each episode on this show, and finding creative ways to do that is so important, and it's so hard to cut through all the noise and all the clutter. And so one of the things that a lot of people have found great success in, but is also very intimidating to the majority of people, are speaking on stages. And that can be online stages like this can intimidate a lot of people even, or certainly offline where you're truly on a physical stage and platform. And so today we're excited to have this conversation with Lisa Moser. And Lisa, why don't you share, just for those who don't know you, we've had you around and been friends for quite a while ourselves, and a lot of our, folks do know you, but tell those who don't, what's your story? Like, how did you get into the speaking world and this whole, idea of building a business through stages?
Yeah, well, it's a story. It started years and years ago. I was kind of thrust into the speaking realm. 100 years ago, you didn't have podcasts and things to listen to, or gurus or courses to learn what it is that you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And so years ago, I won Miss Ohio and was competing in the Miss USA stage. And when that happens, you're kind of thrust into the public speaking and the public eye, and you have to do all these talks and get on stages. And I was petrified of speaking in public. I could do it if I was practiced and I knew what I wanted to say, but to go out and just speak, that petrified me. Like millions and millions of Americans, we don't like public speaking. And that's what I was thrust into. So long story, I was just kind of in my own figure it out, and I always say it was sink or swim. So literally I just kind of learned how to tread water and stay above. So I was doing okay. So that was kind of my training ground and start. And then I progressed in years of experience and being spokesperson for many amazing organizations. I was the spokesperson for the American Diabetes Association, Bristol Myers Squibb Pharmaceutical Company, Nationwide Insurance. There were just so many amazing companies that it was kind of like the influencers today. It was what a spokesperson was back then. So I had the opportunity to do that. And I really had to hone in on those skills. And so that was kind of my training ground. And then, fast forward in the last probably 6 years, was really wanting to help entrepreneurs, business owners learn that skill so that they could grow their businesses. And so I've developed speaking courses. I do one-on-one coaching and all the things to really help people learn how communication and speaking and knowing your messaging is really important in all businesses, whether you're an author trying to talk about your book, or I've literally been to an interior design business where I went in for 6 weeks and helped her hone in on the messaging and what she was doing in her own business. And so I love that because people don't realize the impact of communication and what you're saying and how you're saying it is so important in the vibe and the look of your business.
And that's a great lead into really my first question here for you is why do you believe that speaking is such an effective way to build a business? Because to your point, so many people are petrified by it.
Oh yeah.
Most people try to avoid it at all costs. Even I have a good friend who's actually a very good speaker, but tries to avoid it like the plague. And I'm like, you're really good, but she doesn't want to do it. And every time I'm like, you do a really good job, but
Right.
it's still this, even with a skill, there's still this, emotional, mental angst that some people go through.
Yeah. And I love taking people like those people, Chris. It's like, you're good, but they're scared. And that was me. It was back then. It was like I knew, even as I was growing after all of that, there were times I'd always tell people, you tell me what you want me to talk about. Let me prepare and I can do it. I'll knock it out of the park. But if you said to me right now, stand up and talk about, why you should get a white t-shirt instead of a black t-shirt, I would be like, no, you give me a minute, right?
Yeah.
Because it's mostly that fear of failure or that fear of looking silly. And here's my theory, and it's just my theory. But when you think about when we were younger, with our first experience with public speaking, more so, we just talked and had fun and did all the things. But when we were in school and we had to stand up and do a book report, and for some of us, we may not have read that book, and we have to go up and talk about it.
Wait.
That wouldn't have been Chris. That would not have been Chris.
Oh, it would have been Chris back then.
Okay, because it certainly was me. But you know what I mean? Or, you have to be a president. Who's your president? Go up and talk about it. And so you're in front of your peers. You're in front of a teacher who's going to grade you. And it's very intimidating and very scary. And so that's what we think about when it comes to speaking. We're going to get up in front of a group. They're going to be judging us. If we do something wrong, they're going to laugh, or all the things that we put in our own heads, because that's the way we were kind of geared when it came to speaking. And so it truly is a fear. It truly is oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. And I understand that. But if you own a business or you're trying to build something, you better be able to talk about it. Because if you're not talking about it, I hear all the time, I want my business to speak for itself. Well, not going to do that. Not until it's going and it's doing great. Then you want word of mouth. But at the most part, you have to be the voice of your business.
Yeah.
Nobody else.
David, what have you seen as you've considered this topic in the past?
Well, I think Lisa's hitting on an important piece to this puzzle, is that a lot of times when we talk about speaking, we're thinking about standing on a big stage in front of a large audience, of doing, big public speaking events. And yes, that is certainly one lane to speaking, but having really good speaking skills goes way beyond that. And Lisa's was starting to go there, in that you want to be able to have a good business. You have to be able to tell people why they want to do business with you. You have to be able to articulate your ideas clearly and simply. You have to be able to communicate a message. All of those are speaking skills. All of those are skills on how to communicate well. And if you can't communicate your vision well, your customers are going to look at you and go, I don't get it. Why do I want to become your customer? Because I don't know what you're doing. I don't understand what the value is to me to becoming a customer. Right? But being able to communicate that, being able to say, this is what I'm about, this is what our business is doing, communicating these, all of this stuff flows from communication. And these are all the same skills. And we can get nervous about speaking on stage and things like that. And that is certainly a great way to promote yourself in your business, to get opportunities like that, to do all those things. But there's also just the whole other lane of this, which is just being able to get on a video like this and articulate your thoughts clearly and in an entertaining way that people would actually enjoy listening to you.
Right.
So,
well, and the thing that I think that most people don't think about, they think of the perfection part of it, which I'm guilty of, right? But here's the thing. If you have to learn what I call the art of connection. If you can't learn to connect with people, whether it's on a screen like this, or whether it's in a group, or maybe you're just sitting talking to the guy across the table that you're trying to convince to come be your employee or whatever, you have to learn the art of communication. And I know this is crazy, but I learned that extensively through the interviewing process that I had to do through all that pageant stuff, the Mrs. USA or Miss USA, the Mrs. International stuff. interview is so important because it's all about connecting, right? And if you can't learn that art, so it doesn't matter if it's one person, 10 people, or a group, you have to learn the art of connection. And the art of connection is not about the art of perfection. The art of connection is about being authentic. It's being real. And it's being somebody that when you're talking to them, they're like, oh my gosh, I so relate. She relates. How is she talking to me? How does she know what's in my head? And making me feel that everything's going to be okay, that we can do this. And that is a big, important piece that people miss. And when I work with people, it's like, you can say, and all the things if you want, or all the things that you want to eventually learn to get out of the habit of, it doesn't matter. Because if you're connecting with that audience, they don't care.
Yeah.
They look over it.
Well, it's interesting. This was timely for our conversation today because yesterday I was invited to, it was a grand opening ceremony for a defense contractor in our area. That was already exciting enough, right? It was about an office complex.
Are you going to speak to the aliens, Chris?
I don't know.
Are you going to speak to the aliens?
These people may work with the aliens for all I know, but
Chris is nearby the aliens. So
I am here in Dayton.
One of these days I'm going to get him to take me over there and show me where they live.
But to your point, Lisa, so we had a U.S. congressman there. We had our mayor there. We had representatives for other senators there. I mean, we had all these high-powered people, right? Like speaking on the stage, and the two owners, or the owner, and then like the vice president. And I'll be real honest, almost all of them were terrible.
Yeah.
And the one that was like the general manager for this new facility, he was the worst. And he kept talking and rambling on about all the things. They're a highly technical business that most people in that audience would not understand what they do. And it's top security working with our government anyway. So they can't say a lot anyway. Right. But I mean, I literally found myself like about to fall asleep multiple times. And I'm like, I know they do great stuff.
Sure.
But the communication of that, and first of all, it didn't even need to be communicated, most of what he was saying, because it was not, he wasn't selling us on their business. He was trying to, I think he was trying to brag on the business and what all they do and that, but it was so poorly communicated that I said, those are drudgery kind of, events to go to for me.
Yes. And that's the thing about a lot of people that are speakers. A lot of people are, and I hate things. I know even with my husband in corporate and all the things, when people progress in their business and become, or they're very intelligent and they become these top level executives, or most of them have not learned that art of communication because they are, I am this person. People want to hear from me, and you're sitting there going, yeah, but know your audience.
Yeah.
If you're talking to high level people that understand what you're talking about, that's great. It was kind of like, I'll give you a little story. Back when I was working with Bristol Myers Squibb and the American Diabetes Association, I wrote a children's book. And one of my first times that I was in a really uncomfortable, I mean, I've been in them many times now, but one of the first times that I was really in an uncomfortable situation was when Bristol Myers Squibb asked me to come and speak to an endocrinologist
conference.
Thank you for the word. Words are hard.
I love this story, by the way. So I'm glad you
love that she got endocrinologist out correctly. A conference was the word that got her stuck. I'm just looking at her going, did that just happen?
It did. Sometimes words are hard. I don't know. So I was speaking to a room for probably 200 endocrinologists, right? And it was a big luncheon, and I was sitting up with my husband at the head table. Because it was a lunch, and I was listening to these speakers that you just talked about, Chris. And number one, I am not in a room of my peers. I have no idea what they're talking about. I know a lot about diabetes when they would talk about that stuff, but endocrinology is, all kinds of hormone problems. So anyway, they're going on and on. And I'm like, man, this is so stinking boring. But what it was doing to me, it was getting in my head. And I'm like, these guys are going to think that I am a nitwit. There's this pageant girl coming up and going to talk. I mean, I was a hot mess. And I was looking at my husband. He's like, just go up there and do what you always do. Just do it. And I was like, okay. So I went up there and I just, I gave my presentation that I do about it, and doing it my way, didn't change it. Couldn't get off that stage fast enough. Came down, waiting for a break because I could leave because I didn't have to be a part of this conference. And I had people coming up when we were sneaking out saying, you did a great job. And I'm thinking, yeah, you're being nice. That the whole thing, I was just mortified. Anyway, this was back in the day before email or text or anything. So I remember I had a meeting with Bristol Myers Squibb after, about a week after, and a couple weeks. And when I got there, they gave me the stack of letters that they had received in the mail from doctors at this conference. And the gist of them was, thank you for a breath of fresh air in a normal, boring medical conference. She taught me a new way to talk to my patients. And so you see what I'm saying? So it's like, trust what you know and trust what you do and just do your thing. But my thing was not speaking to doctors and endocrinologists. After that, I was fine doing it because it taught me a lesson. But that's the thing, Chris, is these people are up there used to talking to their peers, and they just come in and talk to you all like what they're talking about, and you don't. And so you really do have to, and the reason I learned to kind of dumb my stuff down, and I don't mean it that way, but I always say talk like you're talking to fourth graders.
Right. Simplify, right?
Right. Because in diabetes, there's so much that people don't understand. And I had to learn how to kind of bring it into so everybody could understand. But what I found was when I did that the people who knew all about it appreciated it. And the people who didn't know that much about it and were overwhelmed appreciated it.
Yeah.
So that's the
wasn't
thing.
It,
trust ourselves.
It wasn't Thomas Edison who said, if you can't explain something simply, you don't really know it.
And a lot of times that's what happens with what you're talking with those people. They're just so into themselves that they know big words and they can do it and they're impressing people, but they're not.
Well, but
politicians, especially, you're not impressing me. Talk to me as when I hear debates, and it's like, talk to me. Don't talk to. I
think you just said it right there, Lisa, is that the doctors before were probably spewing lots of information, giving lots of data, lots of facts.
Yes.
You spoke to them as a human being.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, I don't care if you're a doctor or what you do. Mm-hmm. We're all with the one common connection point we have is we're human beings.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And we all like to be spoken to like a human being. And that's what you did, which is why your speech was so much more well received.
Right.
Because they could receive it on a human level instead of just having a data dump.
Right.
Into them.
Well, to your point, that's probably was one of the biggest game changers for me, because I've spoken for a long time, and having been a pastor before, it's like I was always in front of people in different groups. When I really, really understood that there was an opportunity to help the people in front of me and to be there to focus on them and their needs versus how am I doing? Because I think that's where a lot of people get hung up. I mean, my friend she gets all intimidated. I'm like, you're focused too much on you.
Yes.
You're worried about you and what they're thinking of you. Focus on them and how you can help them, because that was the game. Because now it's like, to your point, even when I, saying in there, that used to drive, me crazy. And I would think I was terrible, but when I focus on connection and helping people, helping my audience, there's a lot of things that I don't worry about anymore, knowing that my message wasn't perfect, right? I didn't go from this perfect script, but it was about the connection piece. And I think that's really important. So kind of shifting to that and getting a little more tactical here is for business leaders who want to grow their business and knowing that communication is so important, like we're talking about, where do they start? Like, what are some tips that they can really focus on? We've talked about a lot of these things, I think, in some way, shape, or form already, but maybe you've developed different frameworks and different specific steps for people to think about. What are some of those?
Well, I think that's right there. Thank you for bringing that up, because that is a huge thing when it comes to speaking or anybody with business is really, honestly, I mean, it sounds silly, but preparation, being prepared, knowing what you're talking about. But I do believe that whether it's a framework or something that helps you stay on task is very helpful. being able to communicate what it is that you want. So for instance, I do a talk when I talk about stage, and it's like preparing yourself for any stage in life, stage like this stage, right. So in my head, it's like I go STAGE. That could be for you and for me to explain it, or just for me to stay on tack, setting our sights, transforming our thoughts, aligning with the right, you know what I mean? So I know when I'm speaking, and if I get stuck, or my mind, like with the, presentation, or what is it, endocrinology and conference or whatever, when your mind gets stuck, you can just go, okay, where am I? And then go to the next. And that keeps you on task, but it also keeps your thoughts directed to a specific layout of what you want to accomplish, as opposed to, and that's a lot of it, especially at networking events. When people go to networking events, is we go off task and we get going down a lane where we can stay on task with just being prepared with what it is. What are our bullet points? What does our audience need to know about us? How can we help them? Because that's the most important thing. It's how can we help? And I teach a lot about that when we go to networking. How are we going to be beneficial instead of spewing to everybody what we do? How can we help people while we're there, right? And so there's just so many things about preparation, knowing what you want to talk about. And the more you do it, the more it gets inside of you, the more it's easier to, go to places and talk about. And as far as what you were talking about, Chris, that comes with all that being done. When you're prepared, I always tell people, when you're prepared and you're passionate about what you talk about, right, that stuff becomes more easily. The connection, the clarity, the confidence, it all comes from being prepared, being passionate about what you're going to, talk about, and things like that. So it's really important.
Well, it's interesting because one of the guys, actually one of our U.S. congressmen who was speaking yesterday, actually did this well, because he was probably the one that I didn't about want to fall asleep. And he was, for one, he was brief, but two, he literally got up. He said, he basically said, there's three things I'm really excited about today. Boom, boom, boom. And so I'm like, that guy knew what he was going to get up there and say with those three talking points.
Right.
Now,
and it helps you as the listener know, okay, we're going through three things. And so you're looking for, okay, what's number two? You're looking, so you're more zoned in. And then when they get to three, it's like, okay, he should be wrapping up soon.
Right. And what was interesting is he was also he was definitely one of the briefest speakers, but he was the best. But the guy who rambled on, he kept talking and talking and talking, and nobody knew what he was talking about. But you could just tell he was just trying to cover everything. And to your point, it was like, this was a big moment for them. I mean, they had the news there, they were doing this whole thing, and it was like preparation. And so are there, when you think about that, are there some tips to prepare, like you kind of talked, I mean, that framework is a key part of it, but from a practice standpoint, is there anything that you've kind of learned over the years to help yourself prepare?
The thing that I've always used even before it was a thing, and it's a thing now, you see it all over, is storytelling. And I think that's where, number one, it's easy. I teach people, my clients all the time. It's like, okay, you're giving me facts, but you've got to put a story with it, because people like stories. It's a connection piece.
Right.
And it's also easy for you because it's your story. So for me, telling you the story about the endocrinologist and that's a story. Right. So people get vested in stories, but also it's easy for me to tell because it happened to me.
Right.
And so it's a way to connect. And so that's where I think politicians and those types of people miss the mark, because they're all about telling. And I have always said, I remember one time you messaged me, Chris, and you're like, I just listened to some insurance guy and he was the worst. He needed you. And we were laughing. And I think about that. And I said, even if you're given, this is your agenda, these are the points that you have to talk about, or this is what you're selling, you need to do this. That's great. But you can still pull in stories. This is if you're going to learn how to sell this phone, you have to talk about this. Let me tell you, when I first started doing this was hard, but this is what I remember when I learned this piece. Oh my gosh, it changed things for me. It's really telling a story with what it is, because that's what grabs people and brings people into your world, so to speak.
David, what are you thinking as you're hearing all this?
I'm thinking I have a lot of people I'd like to introduce Lisa to. Because you're talking about political rallies and different events you've gone to, and I've gone to, because we have like some people that we know that hold like local political office and stuff, and so we get invited to go hear their little fundraiser dinners and things like that, and you hear some of them speak and you're like, wow, I understand completely why you're not gone any farther in your career, because I can't wait for you to stop talking because this is terrible.
But that's a really important point. Like, how many smart people, how many good business people are holding themselves back because of this very topic alone?
Yeah.
Very, very much so.
Because the best way to grow your business is to learn how to talk about it.
Right.
And do it right.
And to be able to get people to buy into your vision.
Yes. Well, you want to know a thing? This is funny too, because I remember this from years and years and years ago. I was a hairstylist for many years in another lifetime. And I remember, this was, again, back before all this social media stuff. They always taught us that being a good hairdresser and making a lot of money was 80% personality and 20% skill.
Wow.
And what is that personality? It's communication.
Yeah,
it's talking, it's relating, it's listening to your client, right? Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was crazy, but it was so true. I mean, luckily I was good at both. But,
yeah, of course.
But I had a friend, that was a hairdresser that really was that 80-20. She was so good. But when I have to do her clients, when she was on vacation, I'd be in those haircuts going, what the heck is going on in here? Right. But, and I hope she doesn't listen to this, but anyway, it was a long time ago. But my point is, she was very successful, but she had that gift. And it's the same way in business. If you have that personality where people want to follow you or lead, what are you doing? Then it's like, oh my gosh, they're going to forgive you. You know, then you have to have the products to back it up. I mean, right. If I sit here and told you how to do all this, and then you started taking my courses or my classes or, training, and you're like, this girl is crazy, then the word might get out. But
yeah, you have to have a good product still. But to your point, an average product can outperform a great product if it's communicated better, if there's good marketing behind it. David and I have talked about that a lot. Like, it's kind of like all the as seen on TV junk that sells millions and millions of dollars out yes. there versus something that's actually really good, but doesn't have the same kind of market, impact. But a lot of it is marketing, right? It's communication of, it's telling the story, or it's making something intriguing. I want to check that out. I want to buy that, whatever. Mm-hmm. Shift gears here a little bit, Lisa, because you've mentioned a couple times, back in the day before, the internet, before everything. Now we've got.
Can I just add, Lisa really isn't that old. She acts like she's been around for more than a century.
You're saying that because you and her are the same age.
I'm like, wait a minute, Lisa, you are not that old. Come on now.
Come on. I have 4 grown children.
That was like 100+ years ago.
She is talking about the 1900s. After all.
No, Lisa's not anywhere near that old. Come on now.
Okay.
So but now
telling yourself that, David.
Hey, I'm going down hard.
Hey,
I'm going down hard.
Youth is a state of mind.
I'm still kind of a child inside.
You are. I can tell you that.
Yes.
No. So, but we do. We have. You were talking about specifically being on those big stages in front of audiences, whether it was pageants or in front of doctors, networking events. I mean, there's all these things that are still out there. But there's also, obviously, in the last several years, things have shifted hard to online, like we're right now. So what are some of the differences that people need to think about, between online and offline communication? Is it the same? Is it different? What do you think?
Well, I'm going to be real honest. And you and I have had this conversation many times. I'm not a huge social media person, right? I think that's a whole other realm in itself, because I don't want to point and do the dances. And all the
you don't want to be a TikTok girl?
I don't want to be a TikTok girl. I struggled when I went on. I mean, I'm being transparent. When I got on, it's like, okay, I know I need to do this. And so I did Instagram for a while. And I just, to me, this sounds terrible, but it's like, I just don't like myself that much that I want to look at myself that much. And then I want to, that's, you know what I mean? I just got so sick of seeing myself on there all the time. And so I'm not good. So that If you want to learn about social media, that pointing and dancing and what do you need to do in the algorithms, that's not me. But here's what I can tell you. When it comes to things like this, I think this is the funniest part, that especially since COVID and all the meetings we're on and all the things that were happening with Zoom. I mean, wouldn't you love to have stock in Zoom back then? All that. I can remember my husband doing interviews virtually, and I'd walk in and I'd see, the top of this guy's head and his eyes, and I'd be like, that's the CEO, it's like somebody needs to teach that guy, But again, I get it because it was kind of new for some people, but now it's not so new.
Right.
So I think when it comes to, I'm about connection, right? I'm all about connection. And so there's a few things that tips that I can give you when it comes to being on camera. And that is number one. Okay. So here's one that I do all the time that I'm doing right now. People aren't aware of where their camera is. So your camera is and I have a big computer. So my camera is way at the top of my big computer. If on a phone, it's easier because it's smaller and you just look in that direction. But on a computer, drop my phone. On a computer, it's bigger. And so you have to look up toward the camera, right? It's so important. Well, what happens is with most people, when I pull you guys up, you're on my computer screen. And so naturally, I want to look over at Chris if he's talking to me. I want to look over at David if he's talking to me, because that's a natural thing. We look at people. And people don't realize that that's not where you want to focus, especially if you are a trainer and you're teaching. Because if I'm trying to teach you a point and I'm looking down here, or if you're talking and I'm looking at you, but then people think, man, she's being rude because she's not even listening to this guy.
Yeah.
You have to be aware. So what I do is, you guys are about this big on my screen. I shrink my screen to where you're very small and up as high as I can get you. And that keeps me, even if I'm looking at you, I'm still looking up and around where you are. I can't have a big screen because I'm a communicator, I'm naturally looking at people. And you can't do that, especially if you're the lead person. You have to always be looking up to where you are. So that's just a little tip that I try to teach people right away, is if you're struggling with that, always keep it up. I used to teach taking a little, I would take a Post-it note and put a little hole in it, a letter. What do you call that? Hole punch.
Yeah.
And I put a little smiley face and put it over there just to remind me that this is where the camera is. This is where the camera is. Because that is a big thing when it comes to communication and teaching, especially online.
Now you got me sitting over here. I'm like shrinking my window. I'm trying to practice right while
it helps. It really does help.
No, you're right. And to your point, absolutely. I mean, even before I've shrunk my window, like using StreamYard here, the way we do for this, I move my screen around.
Yes, move it.
So that when we have two of you, it's all three of us today, but when it's just me and David, I make sure I put David at the center of my screen under my camera.
100%.
So that I can do that, because you're right. There's a very successful businessman in our area, and he started doing videos on LinkedIn, and he's trying to start kind of his own brand, and he's a really sharp business guy, but I can tell when he's on his phone and he's doing this, he's talking to himself, not the camera, right? Yep. So I think that's where a lot of people do. I'm like you, and then when the on the other end of that, right, their eyes are not looking at me, right, or the audience. They're looking at, you can tell they're not. It's like, why are you looking down like that? Well, because he's talking to himself.
Yes.
Not up, like you said. So that's huge, folks. Make sure you're paying attention to that. Like on my laptop, I've got a little green light here right next to my camera, so that attracts my eyes to see that. Anything else?
I have another big tip too. This is another pet peeve tip, and I get it. So do you know how in real life we have personal space, right? And you know how when somebody gets in I always call it my hula hoop. My dog gets in my hula hoop a lot. It's like, dude, you better get out of my hula hoop. It's like we have a personal space, right? And it's when somebody inches into that, it gets uncomfortable, and it's the same with video. I don't know how many times, forgive me, people, I don't want you, but you're like, you see this. And it's a head.
I don't
And
need to see your
it's a
nose hairs,
talking
right?
head, right? It's uncomfortable, even in video. It's uncomfortable. And to remember, you want to be up. People want to see your hands. That's how we communicate. That's when people say, should I talk with my hands? Yeah, because we do it in real life.
Yeah.
So if I'm just this talking head the whole time, it's not as connecting as if I'm backing up and then you get to see me move forward, or you get to see me back up, or, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's more of a communication thing. And so many people, there's a communication coach that I have been watching, and I want to say, you got to back it up a little bit, sister, because you're a little too close to the camera.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's important, more so than they get so caught up on always wear a solid color. Don't ever wear patterns. Don't, okay. But can we get this right first? Can we get the distance and the communication and the facial expressions, and that you're excited to talk to me, as opposed to, the shoulder up head.
Well, the thing that I'm kind of taking away from what you're saying today, Lisa, is we use the word communication, right? But you started early on talking about it's really more about connection.
100%.
And so John Maxwell even has a book called Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. And I love the title. Yes. It's a great book, but I love the title because it's a great reminder that so many people are talking at people all the time, but are they really connecting to people?
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of what if we boiled so much of this down today, is these tips, these skills that you're talking about really come down to make it about the connection, whatever that looks like for that audience. Know your audience and find a way to connect with them. And if you're talking to a group of kids, you're going to do that differently than a group of politicians or a group of professionals in a networking event.
Right.
But knowing you could say the same message or have the same message, but modifying it for that audience is what will bring that connection. Would you agree?
Yes. And there's so many tricks, just like that. How many times have you been like when somebody's up on a big stage and then they come down and they start walking? It's just like, it's a different feel, right? Mm-hmm. And there's times you can do that, and there's times that you can't, as far as when you're on a big stage. But, really just relating to people and looking, almost so many little things, how do you look around the room? It was a thing that I was taught years ago, is if it's a huge audience and there's people in the balcony, what I was always taught is look to the light, because you can't connect to those people. But if you're looking into the light reflects, looks like you're just beaming and you're looking right at people. People that are singers and things like that, they do that. You can't see, a lot of times you can't see past the 3 rows in front of you,
right.
But you have to visibly look like you are connecting to people, especially today, you guys, because here's the thing. We don't have the attention span that we used to. Keynote speaks. When I used to do keynote speeches, you'd be given 45 minutes to an hour.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see that much anymore. People do not have the ability to sit and listen to talk after talk for that long, unless you're doing some kind of workshop or saying, now let's break out.
Right.
People don't have that attention span. So you better, if you're going to be talking at people for a long time and not communicating back and forth, you better do something that, gives them something interesting to think about, to listen to, stories, things like that, because you're going to lose them. And I think that's why it's really important now. Connection is more important than ever, is because we truly are hungry for authentic connection.
David, this is making me think about how, important you and I have been talking about and learning even more recently in the last couple of years or so, just knowing your audience, right? Like truly having that, defined. And I don't know, do you have any final thoughts that you're thinking as Lisa shared today?
Well, I think it just dovetails really well with that, because we teach a lot about how you got to know who your people are, and you got to know them in a very detailed way. It just can't be some broad brushstrokes, because when you're speaking to these people, they have to feel like you understand them. Like they know, like, oh, this person knows what I'm going through. They know where I'm stuck. They know what I'm trying to achieve in my life. They understand all of that. And just everything that Lisa's saying is like so important to know it. but then to be able to communicate and connect with them is like it's like the right hand and the left hand. You have to be able to then, okay, I know who my people are, but now how do I communicate with them in such a way that they feel like they're known? And when they look at me, they go, that's the person I want to work with.
Yes.
That's the person that I need to go buy their course. I need to go buy their book, whatever it may be, because they get it. And that only comes through all the stuff that Lisa's been talking about.
So Lisa, like you mentioned, you do courses, you do coaching, you may not be a big social media girl, but you are on there, right? So
I am.
yeah. So where can people connect with you if they'd like to learn more about what you do and how you do help people with this communication side of
I
things?
think the best way to connect with me is just go to my website, lisamoser.com. It's easy. And then in there is everything that I do, everything that I'm a part of. And I always tell people, if you want to email me, it's lisa@lisamoser.com. It's me answering the emails. I love getting emails. I love hearing people's, what they're struggling with or what their successes that they've had. I love it. And I always set time every day to go look at my emails. So if you want to email me anything, just email me. I'll try to help you out.
Well, that's dangerous. You just opened it up for me to do all sorts of stuff.
I'm going to be getting emails from you.
Well, Lisa, thanks so much for joining us today, folks. Lisa is the real deal. I've actually gone through one of your courses, one of your mastermind groups a couple of years ago, and I learned so much. And I think, this is one of those areas, like, I never intended to be a speaker with my business.
Yeah,
it wasn't
you always
my goal,
say that.
But I have gotten so many speaking opportunities, and I think a lot of it, and this is, I think, important to maybe kind of wrap this up, is even though you may not want to be a speaker for your business, it is one of the easiest ways, or maybe the most natural ways, for people to invite you to share about your business. So you need to really lean into this today and learn this, because a lot of people don't know how to engage people, but they're like, hey, would you come and speak to my group, or would you come and share your about your business or your story? That's the kind of stuff I constantly get. Right. And so for me, it's like, I just need to lean into this and quit resisting it and find people like you who have, put together good frameworks and programs. So folks, check out lisamoser.com, learn what Lisa offers. And Lisa, this has been helpful. I hope that a lot of people have really thought about just, where are their gaps in this today, just because you gave us some very simple but very practical nuggets that are very implementable right now. Like, look at the camera, back away a little bit, right? Like all these things that you just shared.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks for having me. This was great. Appreciate it.
We're glad you joined us and got up early and got all ready for us guys.
Ready for the day.
All right. Well, folks, we're glad that you're with us again. And we just look forward to helping you. If you need help, check out designlaunchgrow.com as well. We'd love to help you with our coaching and our training program and help you take your business to that next level, whatever that means. If you're at the beginning, middle, or growth stages, we want to help you take it to that next level so you can accomplish your dreams, your goals. So take care, and we'll see you next time.